You're listening to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast, released bi-weekly every Sunday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple iTunes. All right, welcome to the East Meets West Pakistani Professional Journeys podcast. Today we have Syed,
Thank you.
who has completed his BS in Accounting and Finance from IBA in Pakistan and MBA from Rotman in Toronto. He's also acquired his CFA, and he's worked in companies such as Habib Bank Limited and Icon Group. He's currently working at Pier Ltd as an analyst. Pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So we can kick off in terms of your time in Pakistan. How was that? And what's your connection to Pakistan?
Yeah, I have been born and raised in Karachi for all my life up until 2019 to 2020. There were no plans of me moving to Canada or going abroad for anything. I did my education in Karachi, did my A-levels. Then I was fortunate enough to get into one of the top business schools back home, IBA Karachi, for its accounting and finance program. It was completed in 2018. During that time, I figured out my interest in finance, and that's how I landed my first role in investment banking with Analyst Bank Limited. During this time, I realized about CFA, and I also kickstarted that. And part of the CFA was also helped by my degree program at IBA because the coursework really facilitated the study. So I started my CFA journey during my last year at IBA, and I gave my first level in December 2017. Got my second level in June 2018, just 6 months. I chose this route, and I still remember only 3 of my other friends also gave this alongside, and we were fortunate enough to get through. And then my journey in the professional world began with investment banking. I was on the equity side. It was a little bit different to the conventional investment banking, so I wasn't doing any deals or stuff. So at Allied, most of the equity trading or prop trading, I would say, is merged within the investment banking department. So I worked there for a year. It was a very great learning experience, I would say, because I never had. Prior to this, I did my internship during the last semester with an asset management company. But this thing was very special because it drove me past how the investment markets work, how the trading and how the research and everything is done to evaluate a stock, make an investment call and things like that. So that was really technical and fundamental. This made the basis for my next job, which was at the largest bank in Pakistan, which is Habib Bank Limited. So I was lucky to get into its treasury and global markets team as a research analyst. And this was another build on in my career because I stayed there for 3 years. I joined as an assistant manager grade, and then I was promoted by the end to the manager level as well. So this was a very nurturing experience because it my personality as well as further enhanced my skill set in terms of the equity research part and the macroeconomic part as well. Because prior to that in Allied, I was only focusing on equities. But over here, since it's treasuries, you need to have a grip on interest rates, how they move, inflation, how it's forecasted, how to take a call and how that impacts your equities and your portfolio. So I think all of that. And then, of course, the FX forecast, I would say, was also very critical because these are the key desks in the treasuries department. So all of that I was working with. And it really helped me build my understanding about those areas. So that was really special. And that's something which helped me a lot in my career in terms of my own grooming. But then it was during this time at Habib Bank that I realized that I should go abroad and do my master's. And I thought about different universities. So when I had my colleagues that were really competitive at Habib Bank, and they were all busy in giving their GMATs or, thinking about universities, thinking about MBAs, how you can, go into consulting, you can go into other fields, through MBA. So that was my first time. But prior to this, I was thinking that maybe either go to LUMS or either go to KSBL or something like that. So I wasn't thinking, at a big scale, but, when an exposure is very important. So when you get that exposure, so when you meet people, that is something which really, helps you also shape your own vision. Your surrounding is very important. So if it is competitive, your surrounding is very important. And for me, it has helped me more focused. So I think that was where I got a first-hand flavor of it as well. Yep. So then I started to do my working, and then unfortunately COVID struck. But for me, I got the time when I was sitting back home, everything was closed, we are working from home. And that was the time when I started to think and explore. And from there on, I started to do my work. I gave my GMAT. That's a different story, but I couldn't crack a good score, I would say. But thank God I had my CFA. So that helped me get GMAT waivers in some of the universities. I'll talk about it later in the podcast as well. But then I gave my IELTS. I did all that work. So 2020 to 2021. I did my homework, prepped myself up, and then fast forward in July of 2021, I submitted my applications for, I think, three schools. Yes, I applied to three schools, and that's how from there on I exited Pakistan. So all in all, my time in Pakistan was great. I still have a lot of family back home. Almost all my family is back home. I'm the one who is here. There are like extended family which lives in Canada, which has been really helpful and really kind to me during my time. But I think that's pretty much.
Great. And then in Pakistan, is there any places or food areas that you enjoy?
Yes, so I am a big time foodie, I would say. During my undergrad, we were very, I would say very desi, I'd
Okay.
say. Usually our university was situated in the main campus that's in Karachi University, within Karachi University. So all the key spots close by, going within Karachi University to have all those Kaaba style things and going to the highway because the highway was also nearby. All the young boys do. So
Yeah.
during that time, I think that was pretty much that I explored almost
Everything's good.
everything in the vicinity. And then if we move forward from 2018 onward, we used to hang out. We used to have, so I have a very different set of friends. So some of my university friends, they have their own places they hang out. And then some of my school friends or other friends, they have their other things to do. I have been a part of both, I would say. So I have explored pretty much of Karachi. I would say the best thing that I recently liked a lot when I went was and has been my favorite is it's actually a Lebanese and Arabic and Turkish cuisine. I really like their stuff because it's very meaty and I would say it's that Arabic style, but in a Pakistani setting, in that flavor, in that aroma. So I think I really like and I really enjoy that. And apart from that, all the other places like Kulachi or the other stuff.
Yes.
So I really like that.
Right. So
Yep.
did you travel anywhere else in Pakistan in terms of go around places or mostly situated in Karachi?
Yeah, so I've been to Islamabad, I've been to Lahore. Islamabad for my Islamabad actually two times, and Lahore also, I would say one time. And then to the northern areas as well. So whenever you guys get a time or have the money, do travel. It really helps and it really shapes your personality. And have that good time. I had very limited thing with my friends. These hangouts were very limited for me, but I had my fair share. And I would say that I traveled to the northern area just before my trip to Toronto. That
Okay.
was
Nice.
in June of 2022. So that was also all credit to my friends in the university. These two friends of mine I traveled with, if they must be watching, they'll know what I'm talking about. So they really pumped me and really made the plan. I was the
Okay.
one who
That's
was
good.
just participating.
Nice.
Most of the hangouts used to take place at my own house as well. We went to Kalam mainly, the northern areas and much of the areas close by. It was really great. And then Islamabad, I would say that I visited twice, one for this trip. And the other one was for my charter because my charter ceremony took place in the President House, Islamabad. I went there with a bunch of other charter holders to collect my charter. So that was for Islamabad and Lahore, mainly for these client visits when I was part of HBL. I went there to give presentations and meet clients.
Nice. So you mentioned you decided to move to Canada. So you moved during COVID and I guess post COVID also, but like how did you manage that in terms of distress levels as well as just like finding a job and whatnot? That must have been quite challenging. Right?
So let me correct you for one thing. I moved after COVID. So that was mainly
After, yeah.
post-COVID period. I moved here in July of 2022. So today, as we speak, this week would be my second year completing in the country. I started my journey for all the homework and all the prepping stuff back in 2021, as I mentioned. And most of my visa part was also done. I applied for my visa in January of 2022. And I was lucky that it got approved in 2 months' time in April of 2022. And then I traveled in July of 2022 and then my program started in August. So that's the initial period. And then the program itself was 2 years and it ended in April of 2024.
Good.
And, and then my job actually started in May, I would say end of April. And then job started in May of 2024. Like,
More in terms of when you first landed the first few months, like how did you adjust yourself? Because a lot of people struggle in terms of figuring out, okay, what should, in terms of staying for a longer period of time in the, even in the West in general. So how were the first 6 months? How did you manage that?
I would say it was a lot going on during
Yeah,
that
it's,
time. So first things first, I would say that this goes especially for the boys and especially for the Pakistani boys. Start doing your home chores because, over here, no one is to do cleaning the dishes, to cleaning the houses, to cleaning your own stuff, and then cooking. So I think all of these things, we start off with very basic stuff. I think these are very basic things that everyone should know. You should work in your own house. And I think that's something being born and raised in Pakistan, I was oblivious of. So I was not aware of most of the things. I did a bit of, it'd be funny to know that when I was coming here, I used to just stand with my mom and she was cooking. This is not something that you can just watch and learn. You have to get your hands dirty and that's how you learn. So that I did not do back home. All of that I did here and that was disastrous in the start. So that's first thing that, start doing your housework, be it as little as, changing your own bed sheets to cleaning your own stuff, to cleaning your own bathroom, to going to the high end stuff, helping and everyone in the house. That's something which everyone should do. So if coming down to the first 6 months, I think the first hurdle that I faced was searching accommodation in Toronto is I would say very tricky, very critical and very difficult, especially for someone who is coming for the first time. So I wasn't aware. I got 1 month's housing in a hostel type building, which was close to my university. I got it for a month, but it was very small. It's by the name of Tartu Student College Residence. It's situated on Bloor Street West. My senior in Rotman used to live over there. He helped me a lot in getting the accommodation done. So that was the first thing sorted for just a month. Then I had my other batchmate who was also flying in from Pakistan with whom I had to, stay. And then we together searched for our first house, in Toronto. It took us about, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks to search a house and we were nearly on the borderline. A few things that we faced as hurdles were the fact that since we were international students, we just had our banking and stuff done. We had no guarantors and stuff. Everyone tries to exploit, sorry to say over here, that they ask for higher rents. Not higher, I would say upfront rents, like 4 or 5, maybe 6 months. So there were people in our batch which we even paid 6 months upfront of rent. So I think that's something that's everyone should be prepared for. And you should be looking at like Kijiji or stuff like that, like Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji or rentals. These are the areas to really look forward to. My advice in this is that from my learning, I was fortunate to get a housing accommodation in my first year close to the university. So try living close to your university, at least in the first 6 months or the first year specifically because of the place. So I would say that try to live closer because you are not aware of the transportation routes. You are still learning. You don't know how the winter is going to treat you. So my advice would be from this learning to stay closer. But once you are through that first year or through those 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, you can change it because I also changed it after a year. So I don't live now anymore close to the university in my second year. So that was one thing of learning. The second thing was adjusting to the new life. So as I mentioned that I was a disaster at cooking. So I knew nothing apart from just like making an egg or just making tea. That was the only thing that I knew. So my breakfast was sorted for a bit, but what to do for lunch and what to do for dinner. So I was not sure. Thanks to my roommate who moved in with me, to my batchmate who moved in with me. He had a bit of sense because he had lived in the Middle East for his jobs and stuff. So he had been away from home for a bit. So he knew some part of the cooking, which really helped me also learn. The one thing that Rotman did during those first 6 months was the fact that it had a very rigorous study program. So there were like 4 courses, which we had to complete in just 1.5 months time. So everything was very rigorous. That was the second biggest change that I had to face. There are terms, which are 1.5 months. It was very clustered. So we did not get a time to cook or do our stuff. So it's very competitive over here. When you have to get jobs, there are not disclosures signed by the university. So your GPA goes straight to the employer. And when you're talking about careers such as consulting or such as investment banking, which is generally what every MBA child has in mind when he or she's coming to the school. So everyone was in that rat race. I would say that everyone was studying. You have to study. If you don't study, you will fall back. So it was really competitive during those first 6 months. So I did not get a chance to properly learn, properly do something for me. And at the same time, we're tight on budget because we are coming from Pakistan. So we don't have to spend that much in dollars. So that's the currency differential as well. So how I sorted this thing was that I got myself a vegetarian tiffin service for a month. It was as cheap as I would say, it was just costing me $5 a meal, but it was only vegetarian. And it sorted my worries from Monday to Friday. For Saturday and Sunday, we used to do something to live on. And this was the story for the first 6 months up until December, I would say. In December, what happened was that there was this break. Then I got a chance to get time out of school. He
Yeah.
said that this is now something we cannot sustain on. So we have to start cooking. So that's when we properly started cooking, me and my friend. And then we divided turns. And that's how we survived 6 or 7 months till we lived in that house till the end of the lease. So I would say that it was not easy. I think I covered housing. I covered the other stuff. I covered the study part. I would say the next important thing that I had to sort was winter clothing. I think that's very important as well because uh, another bit of advice was, and this is something that I got earlier on as well, that Pakistani clothes won't survive the winter over here. So if you no matter get how many layerings, you get thermals, you get jackets, you get sweaters, whatever you do, you need to buy one good winter jacket. And that's very important. So that's an investment that you have to make. So now I'm not saying that go buy a Canada Goose because that's like very expensive, I would say. So you can look for discount stores such as Winners or Marshalls. So they have, or Marks. I think these are some of the premium outlets, or you can go to the outlet stores back home back in Vaughan or, the other areas. So these are places to really explore and look for your winter attire. I would say that do this as soon as possible when you land. Don't wait till November or December to get that sorted because the winter comes on really early and, get your and footwear. So I would say one good winter jacket and then one good footwear. The footwear really helps you a lot. So I would say that don't compromise on these two things. I'm also done.
Oh no, I was gonna say that I think so. It's so important. If you live nearby your university or workplace when you first come, you already take out the cost of leasing or renting or whatever for a car. And then for transportation, it's probably a reduced cost in terms of if your go station is the prices have increased for that as well. A lot of people when they move here is they don't realize the cost that comes with everything, like from rent to transportation to books to, tuition. So it adds up. So yeah, that's really smart that just staying in one place and then being able to be near whatever the workplace or education is. So it's a very good point to bring up.
Yeah, if you do a bit of comparison, I think the student discount reduces. You can get a monthly pass for I think 100 or
Yeah.
110, but then you have to really make that calculation that will you use that $130 or not. So if your class is every day, I think then it makes sense to get it utilized. But if your classes are not every day, then you can afford to stay far because like in my second year, my classes were not happening every day. So they were just happening 2 or 3 days a week. And mostly my classes were happening after four. So I think that really you have to play smart in that sense.
Exactly.
I think this planning part is also something which you really learn when you come over here because you're not accustomed to paying rents. You're not accustomed to paying utilities because all that part is being managed already. So you are just living your own life in your own house. These are the privileges which most of the students have when they are coming from Pakistan to Canada. But when you land in Canada, you have to do everything on your own. You do have friends, you do have people around, but the survival thing is something that you have to figure out on your own. No one is going to hold your finger and take you through. So that's something which helps you grow. It's something that you have to grow with. So because if I compare myself from now to what I was back in 2022 or 2021, I would say that subconsciously a lot has changed during this time as well. Because in IBA or back during my CFA days, I was only studying. But now at least I can say that multitasking is something which I firsthand experienced because I was not only studying, I was looking after all other things as well. And then I was studying. Your potential, it gets the best out of you, I would say. The rigor gets the best out of you, I would say.
So I guess moving back to the career portion. So how did you know you were interested in accounting finance? Was it you saw someone else going into it or you read what made you interested in this field?
It started off in O levels, I would say, when I was giving my high school exams. Initially, I was good at accounting, I would say. And
Okay.
accounting was something during those high school years, which I was really good at. And my teachers actually pushed me or wanted me to do chartered accountancy, to be very honest. During that time, back in 2013, 2014, IBA launched this new degree called accounting and finance, which provided a pathway for two professional
Yeah.
careers. Like one was CFA and the other was chartered accountancy in Pakistan. So in chartered accountancy, what happens is that there are like 14 exams. Out of those exams, you get exemption for 9 or 10. Those
To
numbers you
Canada's
get
only.
exemption for. Yes.
Yeah.
And you are just left with the papers that you need to give during your articleship. So you have a 3 years of articleship that you need to complete once you graduate. And then during that time, you can give those papers to complete your chartered accountancy. So that was one path. The other path was CFA, for which there was no exemption, but the coursework was designed in such a way that it helped facilitate for your level 1, level 2, and level 3. So that was the two parts. So I thought that this is a degree which gives me best of both worlds, because it will give me that grooming when you go to that university life, and then it will be opening two paths for me for which I can decide. So I think that was one thing that really happened during that 2013, 2014 time. It was a no-brainer for me. I thought that this is something that I want to do. So that's how I landed into IBA. My tilt was towards finance because accounting was something that I had already seen. So I always wanted to do something new in life. So finance was something which was new for me, but I had a very disastrous and a horrible start in finance because my first course, which taught basic discounting, was a complete disaster because the teacher was not able to impart correctly. And I would say my situation was such that I couldn't do basic discounting. That was my situation. And then it was again one of my friends who really helped me during that time, helped me learn terminal discounting is dividing by 1 plus R and all that kind of stuff. I was totally clueless in my first year. And I was clueless to the point that I was thinking that leave finance, I would do accountancy. I would do chartered accountancy. I can't do this anymore. So first 2 years, it was this dilemma. And then thankfully, I got a good prof. He's still teaching at IBA. I think it was financial modeling or it was financial management. I don't remember. It was one of these two. That's where my foundation, my basics got right. And then I also got a chance to study a bit of audit and financial reporting because those were core courses, and the advanced auditing and stuff were not core. So I had a chance to learn these basic things. And then from there on, I figured out that audit is something which is very dry. I can't study it, and financial reporting is very dry. Sorry, you're a CPA, but I'm saying this, but taxation was something that I really enjoyed, and I studied it till advanced taxation. But these other two areas, I couldn't find my way through. And that's how I decided that it's about time that I should close the lid for chartered accountancy and focus full on CFA. And that's how that CFA thing started for me. And that's how I landed in the financial industry. So when you land in CFA, there are two parts. One is you get a role in the corporates, like in the FP&A or financial planning analysis, that side. The other part is you get into the investment industry. In investment industry, you can go to equity research, fixed income, other asset class, private equity, investment banking, or investment management. Now, I'm not saying that CFA is something which really helps you, but surely if you want to grow, CFA can help you. It's an accreditation, it's a designation that really helps you in your growth in these areas. So I myself got into equity initially. That was one asset class that I focused on. But real estate was the other one that I was interested in, but I couldn't get a chance back in Pakistan because they were very limited. I would say that when I was starting my career, there was only one REIT that was listed back home. And by the time I was graduating, there were a couple more that had come, but most of them were not hiring, or they did not have the appetite to hire from our industry. I couldn't get a chance, but I was fortunate to get into equities. But then when I came here, I initially had this plan of going into consulting. I studied really hard and I tried to crack all those things, but I couldn't get through in consulting. January of 2023. Basically, the MBA is a co-op program. So I had to secure an internship for the summers. I couldn't get into consulting. And then the other best thing that I had in my mind was get into the investment industry, investment management industry, because that was something that I had prior experience. So I thought that maybe I could leverage that and get into, but I gave a few interviews, but I couldn't get through that as well. And then I figured out that real estate is a big asset class in Canada. So I was fortunate and I was very lucky that there was this one development firm by the name of Incon Group that came in for an internship, and I was able to secure a spot in the team as a financial analyst. So that's how my real estate journey started in Canada. My key role during that time was mainly focused on project financing. They had this project which was up and running, and we had to secure construction financing for it. I worked on that one project, which was a detached housing project based in Maple Grove. And yeah, it was a good learning experience. They specialized in low to mid-rise projects. They had one another condo project as well. That was a big one. So it was a lot of learning during that time, I would say, because real estate is a totally different game. You can understand that it would be basic, like discounting the cash flows. It would be very straightforward rental models, but it's not like that. There are very nuances to the modeling as well. I was lucky that I got trained directly under the managing partners, and they were really kind to impart whatever knowledge they had over the course of time that they had built. So I think that was how I started. And that's how the basics got sorted for real estate. And one more thing that I like about real estate is the fact that it's very tangible when you compare it to
Yeah.
equities.
Yeah.
I have worked for 4 years in equities. So equities and real estate are something two where my passion lies. If I compare real estate with equity, real estate is something which is tangible. There is not much fluff in it. You cannot just say that in equities, you just say that 5-year growth is like 10x or 15% or 10% CAGR. You just say that and then you back your assumption. But in
Yeah.
real estate, it's not like that. Real estate is something you are seeing that there's certain amount of rent that's flowing in.
Yeah.
This rent has historically grown at X level, or it is pegged to inflation. Let's just say if we talk about Ontario, that's how it's going to grow. And if there is like a market rent, this is the norm. These are the comps. This is how the market rents look like. So that's something that I really like about real estate.
Got you. So in terms of the CFA, how was it transition? Was it a quick transition from Pakistan to Canada? Did you have to take any courses or exams in between, or was it you landed, you just applied and got a practical experience, and that was enough, and you got the CFA as well here?
Yeah. So CFA is something that I did back in Pakistan only. So everything was completed from Pakistan. So the major thing was that I did my MBA over here. So that is the major academic thing that I did over here. In terms of securing a job, that networking really helps.
Yep.
Meeting people is really important. And I have on a first-hand basis seen happening with myself that interviews that I got, it's not just that I gave interview for real estate, I gave a few other interviews, and most of those interviews came in either by me excessively applying or I had connected with someone. So I think this connection part, this networking part is really important. And this is something which we are not accustomed to coming from Pakistan, because this is not something that happens in Pakistan. I did not know what networking was when I was in Pakistan, because that's not how business is conducted back home. So in the organization, you do network in Pakistan. So that's the norm. But prior to getting into the market or into the job, I think that's not where networking exists. So that was something which was new for me. It's not very easy to talk to people and then at the end of they say that I need a job. So I think framing your story, framing yourself, I think that's very critical. So I think that really helped me.
Okay.
When you see other people, when you see other batchmates with you doing it in a certain way, I think that's also a good learning part for you. And then you have your career coaches as well who help you with your reading your CV, drafting helping get the best cut for those resumes and cover letters. So I think that was also very critical right at the start. I wouldn't say that Rotman, most of the people think that if they go to Rotman, they will get a job.
Yes.
Now, that's not how it is. If you go to Ivy or if you go to Rotman, you go to Queens, it's not a guarantee that you get a job. We have to get out of this brand conscious thing that we have. So back in Pakistan, most of the people think that if we get into Ivy League, if we get into Harvard, if we get into any other university, we get a job. Sure, you get a job, but you have to work for it. The university is not going to bring the job right on your door.
Exactly.
So that understanding is very important, because most of the people don't have that when they are in Pakistan. Even I did not have that when I was in Pakistan. I was in the same mentality, that getting to Rotman, it's the best school. You will get a job. So that was something that I came in with this mentality, but it really did not work for me that way. Over here, the employer is not interested in you studying from Rotman, you're studying for Ivy, you're studying from Queens. He's not interested. He or she is not interested in hearing that. He or she is interested in how well you will gel in. So he or she is looking at your attitude. Would you be a good cultural fit? So I would say that cultural fit and everything works way ahead over here than your own aptitude. Sure, aptitude, hard work, everything works for you. But I think, connecting with the people on those terms, having those relationships, having those networks, I think that really helps. So I think that was something that I started off with. I started off with talking to people in real estate a lot. And one of those was in Pier 4. And then there was an opening in Pier 4, and then I got the referral, and from there on, it worked.
So
Thank God, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then for Pier 4, how is that? So if for people who don't know, like what your role is and how that experience is, without obviously giving too much detail in terms of the work, but like, how has that experience been like?
Yeah. So my role is as an investment analyst. So it's a real estate investment trust. It works like a mutual fund of real estate. They pool funds from the investors and then they invest and make units out of it. That's how the basic model is. My job is that we specialize in multifamily asset classes. The key responsibility is to underwrite or acquire new properties, all the transaction level stuff. We do that. And then we also do the asset management part. So once we acquire, we go through that transaction journey. And once that property is in our portfolio, we work on it to increase the yield and increase the rent. So that's the basics of my work, basically. It's divided into transaction and asset management.
Got it. And in terms of advice, if you were to go back in time, like in terms of if you were moving to Canada now and you had the experience that you've gone through, is there anything you would have changed throughout this entire process? Before landing, is there anything you would have either thought of before, worked on before, changed something?
I think I mentioned this earlier on, and I will stress this again, that doing your work your own self, that's
Okay.
very important. So that's one advice that I would like to give, that get yourself accustomed to doing your own work. That's highly important. I can't stress it enough.
Yeah.
The second would be that travel. I think if you get a chance, if you have the time, spend it with your friends, travel, look places. Most people consider it as leisure, but sure, it's leisure. But again, it's also experiences. And experiences are very important and they are very sellable. Once you come here to Canada, people talk a lot about experiences. They talk a lot about what they have been through. So I think that's very important to also have. And I think, yeah, that would be pretty much do your research. I would say do your research a lot. It's not just look at what the university is saying or don't look at what the program itself is saying. Talk to people who have been through that program, who are going through it, to get a better understanding of whether it is something that's for me or not. And don't be focused a lot on the geography. Focus on diversifying your options as well. So for myself, I applied one university in the US, one in Canada, and one in the UK. And keep your options open and then make a decision which works best for you. I was lucky that parents supported me a lot. And then my wife has also supported me a lot during this journey. But I would say that for those people who even have issues because with the exchange rate moving a lot, it's very difficult to get now an MBA or a master's because it's now very expensive, I would say. And just work on that value for money part as well, that whether the picture is still rosy or not. Because if now we are talking about a cost of 25, 30 million rupees easily for an MBA. So I think keep a watch out for scholarships as well. You can demand financial aid and merit scholarships as well. So I think keep yourself, up to date on that part as well. That's very critical. If I were back in my place, I would have done a lot more research than I did. So I think that's also very important.
Okay. So I guess I find this to be one of the harder questions here, but how do you define success? You can go both professionally or personally with this question. And if you need to take your time, please do. How do you define success?
Sure. I think I'll mix this together, professional and personal both. I think for me, success is about satisfaction. I would say that if you are satisfied at the end of the day, that whether the work that you did was something that you wanted to do, I think that's where you will find your success in your relationships as well. The way you carry yourself in the society, the way you engage in your relationships and stuff. I think if you are satisfied, if you feel that you have done your part and everyone else says that we are satisfied as well, then you did it right. So
Yeah.
I think that's success for me. It's not about any numbers. It's not about achieving any designation. I would say that being satisfied with what you have done, what you have achieved, I think that's what is success for me. And yeah.
Awesome. So I guess we can end off this interview in terms of for the cultural traits that you would like to keep in Canada. Is there any specific ones? Because a lot of people drift away from their culture and after several years in the West. So is there any specific ones like you would like to try keeping as you grow into the West?
No, this is on the face of it sounds like a very simple question, but I think it can go anywhere. But I would say that start with the basics. I would say the basics are that way that I have figured out in this 2 years. I think there are several things that we take for granted, and family is one thing that we take for granted a lot. And I would say the first thing as a cultural trait that you should inculcate in your own self is that you should learn to value relationships. You should learn to value family values. You should learn to value what family is saying. For me, like my parents, my wife, you should learn to value what they're saying and you should listen to them, I would say. And you should try to foster family living because what I see in Canada is that, as you mentioned also, that people are drifting away. The culture is very different. I would say that when you compare this with Pakistan, the culture is very different in terms of most of the things. I don't have to speak out very openly, but there's a lot of difference that we witness in that. The family thing is something which is very taken for granted, I would say, but it shouldn't be. Try to live close to your family. That's one thing. Either you move them here or you have someone here at least, because that's very important, because that's what I have witnessed during these 2 years, that it's not easy. It's very difficult if you don't have any loved one close by. So I think, and you can also relate to that with your family close by. It really makes a difference. So I think that's very important. Another cultural thing that I would like to speak on this, and we discussed this before as well. It's mostly about, it's something that we as a community need to, take a stand for. And that's mostly for basic things like we have to celebrate Eid, let's just say, but we don't have any holiday for that. So I think these events are something which we should take up at a government level if we are going as a community as well. So at least during that week, have a Friday or a Monday at least bundled up, because mostly what I've seen in Canada is that most of the holidays are bundled up either on Friday or Sunday to make it a long weekend. So I think having something like that for Eid specifically, or for the key Muslim events, I think 2 or 3 days, I think that would be really something which is critical and which would help in shaping our cultural traits going forward as well. And one thing I would like to say on this is the fact that there are like countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, which observe Christmas days.
Yeah.
So that's something when they can do, being diverse, being so multicultural, they can observe, being Muslim majority countries, they can observe Christmas holidays. Canada being more diverse, being more multicultural, can do it. And it's not just specific to Muslims, I would say. It is something that should be taken off for Hindus as well. Their Diwali days or their other important days, they can be bundled up with on Monday or a Friday to at least allow people to have a fair share of having those celebrations, I would say. So this is something which also we should be looking forward to when we are tying ourselves back to our culture and tying ourselves back to our traits.
Awesome. So thank you so much you talked about various topics, both like talking about your experience from Pakistan, going to Canada, the struggles you went through that, and then your experience in finance in Canada as well, and Pakistan as well, and followed up with all the other advice provided for people who are moving here. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was a great experience, and it was great chatting with you.
Yeah, it was likewise. I think it's a great platform that you are running, especially in terms of helping others to learn from different people and different experiences. I'm glad to be a part of this podcast, and thank you for having me, and thank you for taking the time.